On June 22, 1941, with the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, the Waffen-SS were unified under a single operational structure by direct order of Heinrich Himmler, preparing for their deployment on the Eastern Front. Among their most feared units was the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, a lethal armored force that spread terror on both the Eastern and Western fronts, equipped with the formidable Tiger and Panther tanks, symbols of the mechanized power of the Third Reich. Their imposing image was reinforced by their iconic black and camouflage uniforms, designed not only for combat but also to project authority and fear. But it was not only their war machinery that made them dangerous. Their troops wielded the Sturmgewehr 44, the first modern assault rifle, a revolutionary automatic weapon that laid the foundations for future combat rifles. With an advanced arsenal and fanatic determination, the Waffen-SS were the spearhead of the Wehrmacht. In the name of Adolf Hitler, they swore absolute loyalty and sought to conquer both the land and the skies. The unstoppable rise of the Waffen-SS, the birth of the elite. From its beginnings, the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler represented the elite of the Third Reich's paramilitary organization. In a solemn act of absolute fidelity, its members swore unwavering loyalty to Adolf Hitler, committing themselves to follow his orders without question. This oath marked the beginning of the consolidation of the SS, a force that would soon evolve from a personal guard to a top-tier combat unit within the Waffen-SS. In 1934, the Leibstandarte already displayed the iconic black uniforms, designed by Karl Diebitsch and Walter Heck, which projected an image of authority and relentless discipline. Their elegant design, combined with insignia such as the SS runes on the collar and the Nazi armband, made them easily recognizable. Unlike other military forces of the time, their attire was meticulously crafted to command respect and fear, reflecting Himmler's vision of a military and political elite. The influence of the Leibstandarte grew quickly, becoming the unit closest to the Führer. More than just a bodyguard, its members took on roles such as assistants, chauffeurs, and personal aides, reinforcing the image of Hitler as a leader surrounded by an elite of loyal men. As the regime advanced, the Leibstandarte paved the way for the rise of the Waffen-SS. The Waffen-SS experienced its true consolidation during the invasion of the Soviet Union starting on June 22, 1941. Until that moment, its structure and operations had been limited compared to the Wehrmacht. Prior to this campaign, its role was more restricted compared to the Wehrmacht, but the scale of the conflict forced its expansion. They were deployed on different fronts: the Army Group North with the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf and the 4th SS Police Division Polizei, Army Group Center with the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, Army Group South with the 1st and 5th SS Panzer Divisions Leibstandarte and Viking, and the Finnish Army Group with the 6th SS Mountain Division Nord. This mobilization turned the Waffen-SS into an essential component of the German military strategy. During the campaign on the Eastern Front, these units demonstrated their effectiveness in decisive battles. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich contributed to the destruction of the Minsk pocket, while the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf advanced through the Baltic states. In Ukraine, the 1st and 5th SS Panzer Divisions participated in the capture of over 500,000 Soviet soldiers in Kyiv. Despite these successes, they also suffered setbacks, such as the near destruction of the 6th SS Mountain Division Nord on the Kola Peninsula and the retreat of several divisions after the Battle of Moscow. These experiences strengthened the structure of the Waffen-SS and reaffirmed its role in the conflict. With the entry of the United States into the war, the Waffen-SS expanded its ranks, incorporating not only more German soldiers, but also foreign volunteers. New divisions emerged, such as the 8th SS Cavalry Division Florian Geyer and the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen. Additionally, foreign units like the Flemish SS Langemark, the Wallonian SS Wallonie, and the 1st SS Cossack Cavalry Division Kosaken reflected the need to broaden their composition. The consolidation of the Waffen-SS transformed them into a multinational army, with its growth responding more to the urgency of the conflict than to an initial ideological strategy. The Waffen-SS enjoyed preferential treatment over the regular German army, which generated tensions and resentment within the Wehrmacht throughout the war. From the start, these units were conceived as an elite force with a strong ideological component, allowing them to receive high-quality equipment, better supply lines, and priority in the allocation of troops and resources. While many divisions of the Heer suffered shortages of materials, especially in the final phase of the conflict, the Waffen-SS units continued to receive modern armored vehicles, advanced weapons, and well-trained personnel replacements, even when Germany's strategic situation had become desperate. This favoritism led to a perception within the regular army that the Waffen-SS were not only a separate force, but a privileged one, generating strong resentment, especially among the veteran officers of the Wehrmacht, who saw their own units deprived of essential resources while the Waffen-SS were treated with priority. One of the clearest examples of this preferential treatment was the formation of the Waffen-SS Panzer divisions, which in some cases were better equipped than their Heer counterparts. Divisions like the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, Das Reich, Totenkopf, and Viking were outfitted with the most advanced models of tanks and armored vehicles, such as the Panzer IV, Panther, and Tiger, even though many Heer units were still operating with older models or struggled to receive replacements. This advantage in equipment and supplies led to the Waffen-SS Panzer divisions becoming highly offensive and feared forces on the battlefield. However, the excessive reliance on ideology and combat spirit over tactical professionalism often caused these units to act with uncontrollable aggression, resulting in extremely high losses and risky maneuvers that compromised their own positions. While some divisions managed to develop a high level of military competence, many were seen by Heer commanders as wasteful of material and fanatical, more concerned with proving their loyalty to the regime than applying prudent and efficient military tactics. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps was the most powerful and lethal armored unit in Germany during World War II. Formed by the Waffen-SS, it received the best available armament and equipment, surpassing even many divisions of the Heer. Its origin dates back to 1942, when SS Obergruppenführer Paul Hauser persuaded Himmler and Hitler to equip the Leibstandarte, Das Reich, and Totenkopf divisions with a full complement of tanks. From that moment, the Waffen-SS became an elite armored force. Its 3 main divisions were equipped with some of the best armored vehicles in the German army. Among them, the Panther tanks in Ausführung D and Ausführung A models stood out, considered the most advanced among medium tanks. These vehicles were armed with the high-velocity Kampfwagenkanone 42 75mm gun, one of the most effective weapons of the conflict, capable of destroying any enemy tank at more than 2,000 meters. Their combination of firepower, speed, and sloped armor gave them a significant advantage over Soviet T-34 tanks and the Sherman tanks used by the Allies. In addition to the Panthers, the 2nd SS Panzer Corps had a full company of heavy tanks, the Panzer VI Tiger I, known for their great destructive power. These tanks were equipped with the Kampfwagenkanone 36 88mm gun, a weapon with a devastating penetration capacity, capable of destroying any Soviet or Allied armored vehicle before they could get close enough to return fire. Their thick frontal armor made them nearly indestructible in direct combat, giving them a huge advantage on the battlefield. However, not all of the tanks in the 2nd SS Panzer Corps were cutting-edge models. Many units still used Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks, especially in support roles. The Panzer III, though considered obsolete, remained in service in its more recent versions, such as the L and M models, which were equipped with the Kampfwagenkanone 60mm gun. On the other hand, the Panzer IV, in its more advanced versions such as the Ausführung H, was better protected with extra armor and armed with the high-velocity Kampfwagenkanone 40-75mm gun, making them the backbone of the German armored force. Finally, the 2nd SS Panzer Corps Anti-Tank Battalion had specialized vehicles such as the Sturmgeschütz 3 and the Marder 3, designed for the elimination of enemy armor from defensive positions. The soldiers of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps were highly trained combatants, hardened by war, with extensive experience on the battlefield. Most had between 3 and 4 years of active combat, making them seasoned veterans, fully aware of what was required of them and the brutality of the confrontation. Their training was based on aggression, surprise, and the combination of different types of weapons, enabling them to carry out coordinated attacks with devastating firepower. In addition, they were convinced of their technical and tactical superiority over the enemy, which boosted their morale and made them fight with extreme determination, both in offensives and in defense. After the fall of Stalingrad in 1943, the Wehrmacht was forced to reorganize its forces on the Eastern Front. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps was urgently sent to this sector, where it joined the Southern Army Group under the command of Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. Its main mission was to prevent the fall of Kharkov, a key city in the German supply line. However, due to the overwhelming numerical superiority of the Red Army, Hauser made the difficult decision to withdraw his troops on February 15, 1943, disobeying Hitler's order to resist at all costs. This strategic withdrawal allowed the 2nd SS Panzer Corps to regroup and launch a fierce counter-offensive alongside Manstein's forces. In March 1943, they led the Third Battle of Kharkov, executing encircling attacks and destroying multiple Soviet units. The city was recaptured on March 14, consolidating its reputation as one of the most effective formations in the German army. In July 1943, the 2nd SS Panzer Corps participated in Operation Citadel, the last major German offensive attempt on the Eastern Front. In this operation, the Corps was part of the 4th Panzer Army, leading the advance in the southern sector of the Battle of Kursk. Here, they faced the fierce Battle of Prokhorovka, one of the largest tank battles in history. Despite having modern armored vehicles like the Panther and Tiger, the tenacious Soviet resistance and the massive use of anti-tank defenses caused huge losses to the Waffen-SS. After the failure of the operation, the divisions of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps were withdrawn and sent to Italy in response to the Allied invasion of Sicily. However, only the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler was transferred, while the Das Reich and Totenkopf divisions remained on the Eastern Front. In June 1944, after the Allied invasion of Normandy, the 2nd SS Panzer Corps was sent to France to attempt to contain the Allied offensive. Now under the command of SS Gruppenführer Wilhelm Bittrich, the Corps participated in the Battle of Caen, facing the 21st Army Group of the British. However, the Allied air superiority and constant bombings hindered their maneuverability. After the retreat from Normandy, the remnants of the Corps regrouped near Arnhem in September 1944, just in time to face Operation Market Garden, an Allied offensive aimed at capturing key bridges in the Netherlands. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps fought fiercely against the 1st British Airborne Division, inflicting heavy losses and halting the Allied advance. Later, in December 1944, they participated in the Battle of the Bulge, serving under the 6th Panzer Army of Josef Sepp Dietrich. However, the lack of fuel and the American resistance at Bastogne prevented the attack from achieving its objective of splitting the Allies on the Western Front. In early 1945, the 2nd SS Panzer Corps was transferred to Hungary to take part in Operation Spring Awakening, a desperate attempt by the Wehrmacht to reclaim Budapest and the oil fields of Lake Balaton. Despite reinforcements, the offensive was a complete failure, partly due to the poor terrain conditions and fierce Soviet resistance. With the situation deteriorating rapidly, the Corps retreated to Vienna along with the rest of the German forces, attempting to avoid capture by the Red Army. In May 1945, after the fall of Vienna, the last remnants of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps attempted to flee westward to surrender to the Western Allies rather than the Soviets, fearing reprisals. Finally, on May 8, 1945, most of its soldiers and officers surrendered to US forces, marking the end of one of the most powerful armored units of Nazi Germany. The Panzerwerfer 42 and the Nebelwerfer in the Waffen-SS. During World War II, the Waffen-SS employed various artillery technologies to maintain its firepower on the combat fronts. Among them, the multiple rocket launchers, Panzerwerfer 42 and Nebelwerfer stood out, two weapon systems that offered a devastating combination of firepower and psychological terror. The Nebelwerfer, translated as smoke launcher, was originally developed by the German Army as a rocket artillery weapon. Its first model, the Nebelwerfer 41, a 150mm version, was introduced in 1940 and used for the first time in combat during the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. Its impact was immediate. The use of rockets allowed for covering larger areas than conventional artillery, making it ideal for striking large enemy formations or fortified defensive positions. The Nebelwerfer could fire a salvo of 6 rockets in rapid succession, creating a devastating impact on enemy morale. The speed and power of the projectiles, combined with the characteristic deafening sound they made while in flight, led Allied soldiers to nickname it the Screaming Mimi. Additionally, the system could fire projectiles of different types, including high explosive, smoke, and chemical agents, increasing its versatility on the battlefield. The main problem with the Nebelwerfer was that it left visible smoke trails after launching the rockets, which allowed enemy artillery to quickly locate the firing position and respond with counter-battery fire. To counter this problem, the Germans devised a solution: mount the rocket launcher on an armored vehicle to increase its mobility and reduce its vulnerability. This led to the creation of the Panzerwerfer 42. The Panzerwerfer 42 was an improved version of the Nebelwerfer, mounted on the chassis of a semi-track SDKFZ 4/1 Maltier, which gave it greater mobility and protection compared to towed models. It was equipped with 10 150mm launch tubes and could carry up to 20 rockets, allowing it to perform 2 salvos before needing to reload. With a maximum speed of 40 km per hour and a crew of 3 men, this system combined the destructive power of the rockets with the ability to move quickly after each attack. Despite its firepower, the Panzerwerfer had several limitations. Its rate of fire was relatively low since the rockets took time to reload. Additionally, its 8mm armor only protected against small arms fire and shrapnel, leaving the vehicle vulnerable to tank or anti-tank artillery attacks. However, its mobility allowed it to reposition quickly after firing, making it difficult to eliminate by enemy forces. One of the first significant uses of the Panzerwerfer 42 and the Nebelwerfer in combat occurred during the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. In this offensive, the Germans extensively employed these rocket launchers to soften Soviet positions before the armored assaults. However, Soviet resistance and the extensive use of anti-tank defenses caused a high number of casualties among German troops. The Allies encountered the Panzerwerfer during the Battle of Normandy, and its impact was devastating. British and Canadian troops, who faced the largest concentration of Panzer forces in the Caen sector, were harshly hit by the rocket launchers. The 7th Werfer Brigade, composed of the 83rd and 84th Werfer regiments, launched more than 8,000 tons of munitions at the Allied troops on Hill 112, hindering their progress. During the German offensive in the Ardennes, the Panzerwerfer played a crucial role in the artillery bombardments before the armored assaults. The American defensive positions in Bastogne were attacked with rockets, creating confusion and panic among the Allied troops. However, the lack of supplies and fuel limited the effectiveness of these weapons in the final phase of the offensive. The last major use of the Panzerwerfer occurred during the defense of Berlin. The German forces, in a desperate situation, employed their last rocket launchers to slow down the Soviet advance on the streets of the capital. Despite their efforts, the numerical and material superiority of the Red Army resulted in the fall of the city on May 2, 1945. Sturmgewehr 44, the birth of the assault rifle that changed history. During World War II, the German army faced the need for a weapon that could combine the firepower of a machine gun with the mobility of a standard rifle. Thus, the STG-44 was born, the first modern assault rifle. Developed by Hugo Schmeisser and a team of engineers in 1942, the STG-44 incorporated key innovations such as the intermediate caliber, which gave it the perfect balance between range and rate of fire. Its impact would mainly be felt in the hands of the elite troops of the Waffen-SS, who would use it with great effectiveness in decisive battles like the Battle of the Ardennes. Although the weapon revolutionized the battlefield, its production was much more complex than anticipated. Adolf Hitler's plan to produce millions of Sturmgewehr 44 units was ambitious. No less than 200 million rounds per month were planned, which required the mobilization of an unprecedented number of workers and resources. To fulfill this massive production, an additional 86,000 workers would be needed, a number that Germany could not obtain, as it was already facing serious logistical problems due to a shortage of skilled labor. The German industry was already at the limit of its capacity, and the country was fighting a war on multiple fronts. The production of weapons was not the only challenge. Tensions in supply lines and the constant Allied pressure on German factories made it difficult to achieve the expected numbers. In the early years of the war, the German forces were forced to revise their tactics and armament. The standard rifle, the Kar-98K, was effective for long-range combat. But the demands of the front lines in territories like Russia, where distances were shorter and skirmishes were more frequent, revealed the need for a more versatile weapon. German engineers began working on a new class of weapon that could offer the best of both worlds: the firepower of an assault rifle and the maneuverability of a submachine gun. The result was the Sturmgewehr 44, an assault rifle that used the intermediate 7.92 by 33 mm cartridge, giving it a balance between range and firepower. Its innovative design marked the beginning of a new era in military weaponry. The STG-44 was capable of firing both automatically and semi-automatically, making it an ideal tool for modern warfare, where mobility and the ability to quickly respond to changes in terrain were essential. From its creation, the STG-44 was mainly intended for the Waffen-SS, the elite military unit of the Third Reich. This unit, known for its brutality and ideological fervor, was tasked with pushing German warfare tactics to the limit. The STG-44 fit perfectly with their combat approach, as it allowed troops to move quickly and adapt their fire to the circumstances of the terrain. While traditional rifles were more effective at long distances, the STG-44 excelled in close combat and assault situations, providing a crucial advantage on the ground. One of the most iconic moments of the STG-44's use was during the Battle of the Ardennes in 1944, when German forces attempted a surprise offensive against the Allied forces on the Western Front. German troops, including the Panzergrenadiers, a mechanized infantry unit fighting alongside armored units, used the STG-44 with great effectiveness in this battle. The Panzergrenadiers, trained to operate in extreme conditions with a high degree of mobility, benefited greatly from the STG-44. A critical factor during World War II was the shortage of ammunition, especially for German forces. As the war intensified, the need for weaponry, particularly the STG-44 assault rifle, became increasingly urgent. However, the production forecasts for the STG-44, which required the manufacturing of 200 million rounds per month, proved difficult to fulfill due to a lack of resources and manpower. According to German calculations, to meet the production expectations for this rifle, around 86,000 additional workers would have been needed. However, these workers were unavailable due to the heavy losses suffered on the Eastern Front, which severely affected both production and supply capacity. Despite these efforts, the ammunition shortage became an even more critical problem, and the situation on the battlefield reflected these difficulties. The lack of ammunition was so severe that, at times, units like the 1st Infantry Division, which still had access to limited resources, were forced to fight with the bare minimum necessary. Waffen-SS uniforms, avant-garde design ahead of its time. In 1932, the SS adopted an iconic uniform conceived by Karl Diebitsch in collaboration with graphic designer Walter Heck. This outfit included a brown shirt as a reference to the SA, but the rest of the clothing, from the footwear to the military-style cap, was entirely black, except for the distinctive red armband. For adverse weather conditions, long wool coats were provided, featuring the same identifying elements, epaulets, neck patches, and the characteristic armband. During this period, a new buckle for the belt was designed, manufactured by the Overhoff Company, with the inscription, "My honor is loyalty," replacing the previous version used by the SA. New ranks were added within the SS hierarchy, including the positions of Sturmmann and Rottenführer. At the same time, Himmler implemented a more rigorous selection system for entry, requiring documented proof of Aryan ancestry. A mandatory probationary period was established under the SS Anwärter status, during which candidates had to remain for at least 6 months before being officially admitted as SS man. In response to the increasing number of members, Röhm pushed for the creation of new officer ranks, introducing the titles of Obersturmführer and Obersturmbannführer to reinforce the command structure. In 1933, after Hitler's rise to power as Chancellor, the SS began to establish a clearer differentiation between officers and rank-and-file soldiers. From that point onward, one could only be promoted to the rank of Sturmführer with Himmler's direct approval, who personally evaluated each request. Himmler rejected the traditional military hierarchies and banned the use of the prefix Herr when addressing senior officers, a common practice in the armed forces. Instead, the use of Kamerad was encouraged as the form of address in most situations. That same year, the double S runic insignia was introduced, which would eventually become the emblem representing the entire organization. Initially, its use was limited to the members of the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. The main proponent of this insignia was Sepp Dietrich, who on November 4, 1933, declared the Leibstandarte an independent formation, subordinated exclusively to Hitler. Dietrich even forbade Himmler access to the Leibstandarte barracks in Berlin, and for several months ordered his soldiers to wear the black uniform without the swastika armband, distinguishing them from the regular units of the Allgemeine SS in Germany. In 1934, with the expansion of the SS Verfügungstruppe, the use of the runic insignia spread to these new formations, which would later evolve into the Waffen-SS to distinguish them from the main Leibstandarte regiment. The SSVT adopted variants of the insignia, with small numbers indicating the unit to which they belonged. 3 versions were established: SS-1 for the Deutschland Regiment, SS-2 for Germania, and from 1938, SS-3 for Der Führer. These identifications endured throughout World War II and remained even when the original regiments grew into the 2nd SS Division, Das Reich, which was equivalent in size to a German army division. A key event in the evolution of the SS ranks and insignias structure was the Night of the Long Knives, which took place between June 30th and July 2nd, 1934. The SS's involvement in the elimination of the SA leadership solidified its position as an autonomous organization within the Nazi Party, answering only to Hitler. As a result, several rank titles were modified to completely dissociate the SS from its origins in the SA. The most significant change was the creation of the rank of Reichsführer SS to designate the supreme commander of the SS. This new rank, equivalent to Field Marshal in the army, granted Himmler a position of ultimate authority. Prior to 1934, Himmler was simply recognized as an SS Obergruppenführer, and the title of Reichsführer was merely honorary, although he preferred to use it himself. With its formalization as an official rank, along with the restructuring of other titles, the definitive nomenclature of the SS ranks was established, which was used until the dissolution of the organization at the end of World War II. When World War II broke out in 1939, the grey service uniforms of the Allgemeine SS took on a more military appearance by incorporating epaulets similar to those of the Wehrmacht, except for the SS generals, who continued wearing the silver-braided epaulets until 1942. During this period, the rank of SS Oberführer lost its status as a general officer. Rank and came to be regarded as equivalent to a senior colonel. The iconic black uniform was worn less and less, being relegated to part-time reservists of the Allgemeine SS. The last massive appearance of the black uniform was during the Victory Parade in Berlin after the fall of France in June 1940. In 1942, Himmler ordered the withdrawal of most of these uniforms, which were sent to the Eastern Front to be used by local police auxiliary units or redistributed among the German SS in countries such as the Netherlands and Denmark. Since 1937, the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler and the SS Verfügungstruppe adopted a closed field uniform in grey-green, which with the onset of the conflict became the standard for the Waffen-SS. This new Feldanzug was similar to the 1936 Army field uniform, but with design differences. The collar was wider and Feldgrau, field grey, instead of bottle green like the Heers. The lower pockets were angled in a distinctive SS design, and the second button was placed lower to allow the collar to be worn open with a tie under certain circumstances. The Totenkopf branch, designated as a reserve for the Waffen-SS, also adopted this attire. The soldiers of the Waffen-SS Panzer units wore a black double-breasted uniform similar to the army's, but with a slightly different cut. As the war progressed, the SS made extensive use of camouflage clothing, which gave them an advantage in various combat conditions. Meanwhile, the personnel of the SS headquarters, particularly the members of the Reichssicherheitshauptamt, Reich Security Main Office, continued wearing the grey-brown service uniform in their administrative functions. During the Ardennes offensive in the winter of 1944 to 1945, the Waffen-SS Panzergrenadiers wore advanced camouflage uniforms designed to maximize concealment in wooded and snowy terrain. The uniform consisted of a reversible camouflage jacket with patterns in brown and green on one side and white on the other for use in snowy environments. Camouflage trousers and integrated hoods were also used to enhance protection against the cold. Additionally, it was complemented with gloves and winter boots, ensuring mobility and survival in extreme conditions. The camouflage clothing worn by the Waffen-SS in the Ardennes was a clear example of their tactical approach and innovation in military attire. Panzergrenadiers SS, the armored infantry of Nazi terror. The Panzergrenadiers SS were mechanized infantry troops of the Waffen-SS, designed to operate in close coordination with German armored divisions during World War II. These units combined the mobility and firepower of armored vehicles with the flexibility of infantry, allowing them to make rapid advances and secure strategic positions on the battlefield. The Panzergrenadiers SS were trained to operate alongside panzer tanks, using armored transport vehicles like the SDKFZ 251, which enabled them to move quickly on the front and deploy effectively. They were armed with a diverse arsenal, including MG-42 machine guns, STG-44 assault rifles, and Panzerfaust anti-tank grenades. Since the beginning of the invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, the Waffen-SS were restructured under unified command by order of Heinrich Himmler, integrating into the German war machine with a key role in the Eastern Offensive. Within these units, the Panzergrenadiers SS emerged as a fundamental shock force, distinguished for their role in mechanized combat. Although regime propaganda portrayed them as elite warriors, the reality on the battlefield told a different story. Just 5 months after the start of Operation Barbarossa, 9% of the combat forces of the Waffen-SS had been killed. The casualty rate among the Panzergrenadiers SS was double that of the Heer, regular German army, highlighting serious issues in their training and combat tactics. However, rather than acknowledging these errors, the Nazi high command avoided any self-criticism and reinforced the narrative of their supposed bravery. To correct the deficiencies in training, Theodor Eicke, former commander of the Guard units at concentration camps and a fanatical supporter of National Socialism, took leadership in the training of the Panzergrenadiers SS. Under his command, efforts were made to improve their operational capability, though they continued to show notable shortcomings in infantry tactics. These soldiers lacked training in night combat, fighting in hostile environments, camouflage, and fortification of positions. They also showed deficiencies in fire discipline and coordination with armored units. Faced with these limitations, the Nazi high command chose to compensate for the lack of preparation by increasing the number of armored vehicles assigned to the Panzergrenadiers SS. This decision transformed these troops into a hybrid force, specialized in mechanized warfare, with the goal of improving their performance on the battlefield. However, the lack of experience in the large-scale operation of armored vehicles created operational problems. During the Second Battle of Kharkov, when Soviet troops briefly recaptured the city, the Panzergrenadiers SS were forced to sabotage about 30 panzer tanks to prevent them from falling intact into enemy hands. Although the city was later recaptured by the Germans, this episode highlighted the lack of skill these units had in the tactical use of their armored vehicles. The insufficient preparation in foot combat and the inexperience in coordinating armored units with infantry revealed the weak points of the Panzergrenadiers SS. Despite being equipped with advanced tanks such as the Panzer IV, Panther, and Tiger, their lack of expertise limited their effectiveness on the battlefield. A prolonged learning process was necessary throughout the war for these troops to reach an acceptable tactical level in the use of their mechanized units. As the conflict progressed and the situation became more desperate for Germany, Himmler fully exploited the image of the Panzergrenadiers SS as an elite force. Any small success in combat was exaggerated and turned into a heroic feat that was communicated directly to Hitler. This type of propaganda allowed Himmler to consolidate his power and gain greater resources for the Waffen-SS. After the failure of Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Hitler began to see in the Waffen-SS the model of a future National Socialist Wehrmacht, in which the Panzergrenadiers SS would play a central role as mechanized assault infantry. For Himmler, this meant an even greater rise within the apparatus of the Third Reich, giving him control over a militarized force that not only responded on the battlefield, but also served as an ideological and political instrument of the Nazi regime. To strengthen the myth among the German population, the SS turned to the talent of a renowned graphic designer of the time, Ottomar Anton. His meticulously crafted posters projected an incredibly attractive image of the Waffen-SS, strategically designed to capture the attention of youth and encourage enlistment. Through this visual propaganda, the organization presented joining its ranks as a unique opportunity, emphasizing the honor of serving as part of Hitler's personal guard. This recruitment strategy became a key tool in attracting new members to this ideologically driven fighting force. The SS propaganda machinery was not limited to simple posters. Himmler established a special team of war correspondents who accompanied the units on their operations and documented each battle with bulletins that glorified their supposed feats. These reports were then reproduced and amplified in newspapers, radio broadcasts, and other media, forming the basis of a massive media campaign. Additionally, the newsreels shown in cinemas included 2 to 3 weekly segments dedicated exclusively to the Waffen-SS, ensuring that its image overshadowed that of the rest of the German military forces. Nothing was left to chance in the construction of their image. While the Wehrmacht was depicted in propaganda with monotonous shots of soldiers marching in formation, the Waffen-SS adopted a new visual strategy. Their troops were filmed in action, surrounded by fire and destruction, wearing their unmistakable uniforms, projecting an image of bravery and aggressiveness. The audience was captivated. The myth was solidified. They were presented as the elite. However, this idealized perception of the SS fighters collapsed too late. It was not until the interrogations carried out by the Allies in the final months of the war that the differences with the regular army infantry began to emerge. Just 2 months before the end of the conflict, US intelligence began to reconsider its view on the Waffen-SS, and there was a clear distancing from the myth. But the change in perspective came too late. By then, the image of the Waffen-SS as an elite force was already deeply rooted in history. Kampfgruppe Peiper, the final offensive of the Waffen-SS. In the last major German offensive on the Western Front, known as the Battle of the Bulge, the Nazi High Command adopted an audacious strategy to concentrate their most powerful forces in the northern sector, trusting that the elite divisions of the Waffen-SS would succeed in breaking through enemy lines. The 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend were the units chosen to lead the attack, with the mission of advancing at all costs to the port of Antwerp and forcing the Allies to negotiate. The spearhead of this attack was represented by the 1st SS Panzer Division, a force made up of both veteran soldiers with combat experience and young recruits eager to prove themselves on the battlefield. Their offensive capability was impressive, combining heavy tanks, mobile artillery, and anti-aircraft units, making them a lethal threat to any Allied resistance. However, within this offensive, one unit became the emblem of the ferocity of the German assault, the Kampfgruppe Peiper, under the command of the ambitious Joachim Peiper. This shock force became the most feared in the northern sector, advancing quickly and inflicting devastating damage in its wake. The brutality with which they operated and their key role in the offensive made them the symbol of Germany's last attempt to tilt the balance of the war in their favor. During the Ardennes offensive, the 6th Panzer Army, commanded by SS Oberstgruppenführer Josef Sepp Dietrich, led the German attack with its most experienced Waffen-SS units. Their main mission was to break through to Antwerp, while the 5th Panzer Army, under the command of Hasso von Manteuffel, was tasked with advancing towards Brussels. On the southern flank, the 7th Army, commanded by Erich Brandenberger, protected the German line from the Luxembourg border. Within this offensive, the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, was divided into 4 Kampfgruppen, each with a specific task. Among them, the Kampfgruppe Peiper, commanded by Joachim Peiper, took the vanguard of the operation. Peiper, a veteran of the Eastern Front and an expert in armored warfare, expressed concerns about the routes his unit would need to take. The difficulty of the Ardennes terrain, with narrow and poorly maintained roads, would make their advance difficult. However, when he was informed that the strategy had been personally designed by Hitler, he had no choice but to accept the mission. The forces were organized into 4 main units: the Kampfgruppe Peiper, led by Joachim Peiper; the Kampfgruppe Hansen, commanded by Max Hansen; the Kampfgruppe Knittel, under the leadership of Gustav Knittel; and the Kampfgruppe Sandig, commanded by Rudolf Sandig. In the early days of the offensive, Peiper and his unit made their way through the Ardennes, overcoming multiple obstacles and reaching several of their initial objectives. On December 18, 1944, he ordered his rearward forces to eliminate the American resistance in Stavelot and continue the advance. This decision would unknowingly seal the fate of his Kampfgruppe. That same day, Kampfgruppe Hansen ambushed an American convoy from the 14th Cavalry Group using the fog as cover. The surprise was total, forcing the Americans to abandon their vehicles and retreat to Puteaux. By December 19th, the element of surprise from the German offensive had dissipated. The Allied troops, who had initially been pushed back, began organizing a more effective resistance. 2 days earlier, on December 17th, the Allied command had ordered the deployment of the 30th Infantry Division of the U.S. Army around Eupen, tasked with blocking Peiper's advance and establishing a defensive line from Malmedy to Stoumont. As the Americans secured their positions, the 119th Infantry Regiment set up in Stoumont, while the 117th Regiment withdrew and reorganized in Stavelot, reclaiming part of the ground Peiper had ignored. If the Allied operation succeeded, the Kampfgruppe Peiper would be isolated from the rest of the Leibstandarte. During the night of December 18th to 19th, the Kampfgruppe Peiper stopped on the outskirts of Stoumont. Although Peiper knew that there were enemy forces in the city, he was not clear on their numbers or defensive capabilities, so he decided to wait until dawn to launch the attack. On December 19, 1944, with the first light of day, the Kampfgruppe Peiper began its offensive against Stoumont. The American resistance was fierce, but after intense fighting, Peiper's troops managed to take the city. The most critical moment came when the German half-tracks burst into the streets and began to clear house by house, securing full control of the area and capturing numerous Allied prisoners. After consolidating their position, the German forces paused to reorganize. American material was requisitioned, and damages were assessed before continuing the advance. The next goal was a small train station on the outskirts of Stoumont. However, when the first Panther tank advanced along the road and took a curve, a powerful explosion shook the area. A 90mm round fired from a camouflaged position pierced the tank's armor and destroyed it instantly. Peiper was surprised by the ferocity of the enemy fire. Believing the path was clear, he had underestimated the Allies' defensive preparation. As more shells impacted against his vanguard, he realized his unit was in danger. With no other option, he ordered his men to resist and wait for new orders before continuing the offensive. The SS colonel, after assessing the situation in which his unit found itself, quickly understood that his position was critical. The loss of the station and the lack of progress in Stavelot made the situation even worse. The American forces, specifically the 117th Infantry Regiment and the 743rd Tank Battalion, launched an offensive from Ster and Renardmont, fully recapturing Stavelot. Even more concerning, the Americans regained control of the access routes, cutting off any possibility of resupply and leaving Kampfgruppe Peiper isolated from the rest of the 1st Panzer Division SS. With fuel supplies nearly exhausted, Peiper ordered the withdrawal of his Panthers back to Stoumont and established a defensive perimeter around La Glaise, awaiting a counter-offensive that would restore the connection with his lines. To break the encirclement, Kampfgruppe Hansen was ordered to advance and free Peiper from his isolation. However, when attempting to cross Trois Ponts, their forces encountered stiff American resistance, preventing any advance. The Americans after the battle withdrew to the west of the Sambre River, destroying bridges in their retreat to prevent the Germans from crossing. The collapse of the bridge at Trois Ponts forced Hansen to seek another route, finding an alternative in Rochelenval to the south. At 5:30 p.m., The German infantry, supported by armored vehicles, launched an attack on the bridge. But before they could cross it, the 307th Battalion's airborne engineers detonated explosives previously placed, sinking the structure into the river. With this, the last hope of freeing Kampfgruppe Peiper disappeared. After the failure of the rescue, the Luftwaffe attempted to airdrop supplies to the surrounded forces. However, the operation was a disaster. Poor coordination led to containers of ammunition, food, and water falling onto positions controlled by the Americans. With no possibility of resupply and resources running out, Peiper requested authorization to abandon the position. He finally received the order to withdraw. To buy time, he left a small rear guard to slow down the Americans while the bulk of his men escaped. In their retreat, they left behind more than 100 vehicles, including 6 King Tiger tanks and 12 Panther tanks, which were abandoned due to lack of fuel.